again, ECED 2360 students, I am making this video. We are in Module 4. I can't believe it. So we're going to be working in Module 4, which is called Planning for Instruction. So I told you in the video last time that there will be a module where you have to do both a discussion and a case study assignment. So that is actually going to be during Module 4. So remember, each module is 2 weeks long. So just try to prioritize your time so you're aware of what's expected, and then that you're able to get the things done and accomplished that you need to get accomplished. So when you get into Module 4, just like every module, you'll see the first section is going to be kind of an overview of what you're going to be doing. Then you get into the actual lessons themselves. So you can break this up however you see fit. Most students like to do the first section, lesson 4.1, 1 week, and then 4.2 the next week. I always tell students, go ahead after you read the overview and get into the assignment to see what you need to do. Okay, so that's the first thing that we're going to do, is we're going to look at the assignments, and then of course you'll have a quiz at the end of each module. So let's look at the Module 4 discussion activity. So for the Module 4 discussion, what you're going to be doing is we're really going to be looking at how we form partnerships with families. Think about how difficult it would be to raise a child with disability. I always tell students and ask them this question: who is the child's first teacher? If you answered parent, you're correct. So what I want you to do is, I have some audio clips here for you. Okay? You're going to see, these are phone interviews. These are from experienced practitioners who work with professional partnerships. So I have 5 of them here, and I also have a transcript. If you'd rather not watch the videos, you can read. I know it really depends on what type of learner you are. Some people don't want to watch the videos. Some people just like to read because they're a read and write learner. It's up to you, but that's provided there if you'd rather not watch the videos. If you want to watch them, they're there as well. And you're going to listen to them. I also want you to go to this link, which is the Connect Module 4, Family Partnerships. Okay, so this webpage is really going to give you some background, okay, some base knowledge of what you need to know as far as research when it comes to family professional partnerships. So you're going to read through this, okay, and these are people who are very experienced, and then here are some audio clips as well, so you can listen to those, which are really interesting. It kind of gives you a synopsis of the different people, okay? So it gives you some background knowledge into parents and practitioners. And remember, these are from all around the country, and they have experience with this. They're going to share their views with you. So up here, you can see it gives you a background of each person that you will be listening to. So for instance, let's look at the first one. Janice, the mother of 2 children, including Micah, who has intellectual disabilities. She talks about her experience with teachers sometimes only focusing on the disability and not the whole child. Okay, that goes back to that person first language. Okay, so you can look at those, and then I have them here for you. Okay, and this is basically the same as the web page. I just put it there twice for you, but that's what is in here. Then you're going to download the discussion activity form. Okay, so for each of those clips, remember you can get it from here or here, whatever you want to do. From each of those clips, you're going to try to give at least 2 suggestions for those people. Okay, so for Janice, you'd give her 2 suggestions that you'd want to incorporate in your own family-oriented practice. So that makes you need to have 10 suggestions in all, but I want you to do 2 for each person. So I'm going to go ahead and open this up so you can see what it looks like. Okay, So I do offer suggestions. I want you to download this form and type in, because this is what you're going to be submitting. This is going to make it easier for me to grade. So after you listen to those 5 clips, those phone interviews, you're going to give at least 2 suggestions that you can incorporate into your own partnership-oriented practices, so how you would work with families. So as you're doing this, just think about suggestions that would actually help the family partnership. And this activity will make more sense after you complete the lessons, because you'll have a greater understanding and there'll be connections. That way you'll be able to give suggestions. Right now, you're kind of thinking, well, what suggestions do I give them? Once you get into the content, it'll make more sense. You'll be able to provide those suggestions very quickly. So I put a box here. I want you to write the suggestions in the box for each person. Now at the end, there's a box called reflection. I want you to answer or reflect by answering these questions here. Which of these suggestions particularly spoke to you, and why? Do you feel that you could be competent in implementing strategies, or would you need guidance, and of what kind? What specific skills might you need to improve to fulfill the teacher's role as partner to families? And the last question is, what do you see as the challenges and rewards of building a partnership with families of children with disabilities? Do you feel these would differ from working with families or other students, and in what way? So your reflection is going to be these questions. I gave you guiding questions to help you with your reflection. You're going to put your reflection, which is the answer to these questions, in this box. The reflection is 300 words minimum, okay? That's going to be pretty easy with these guiding questions here. These don't have a minimum. You're just putting 2 suggestions for each person. Your reflection has to be 300 word minimum. So that's what you will save, and you are going to copy and paste the form into the Module 4 discussion activity. So if you go to communications and you hit discussions, okay, you're going to see Module 4 discussion. Okay, so this is where you're going to post that document you saved. So you click on it, you'll hit start new thread, and then you'll post it there. So that's where you'll put your assignment. Because if you go to Dropbox and you go under Module 4, there's nothing with discussions in there. So discussions would have to be under communications. That's where you'll post that form that I just opened for you. You'll have to scroll down, and you're going to see Module 4 discussion. That's where you will put that file. Okay, so let's go back to the assignment. I wanted to point something out for you. Okay, so remember, whenever you put something on the discussion board, I would like you to respond to at least one person. That's what a discussion is. You're engaging with your peers. You don't have to respond to 2. I'm fine with just 1 because there's a lot of assignments going on this week because you have a discussion and a case study. So go ahead and respond to at least 1 person. So that's what we're going to do there. Let's look at the second part of your assignment, which is the case study transition plan. Now, I emailed you this past Thursday a video, and I don't know when you watched it. If you haven't watched it, you need to watch it, talking about the case study for Module 3. Whichever person that you picked, and I want to remind you, if you go to the course homepage, I included a table so you can always refer to it to see who you picked. Whoever you pick, you have to stay with that child the entire time. So just keep that in mind. So with that being said, you will use that same child to complete your second case study activity. So the first one that you did in Module 3 was a PowerPoint talking about that child's disability. This is called a transition plan. Now, you will be able to complete this after completing the lessons in Module 4. This will make more sense and you'll be able to complete it. So when we're looking at case studies, each case study is involving a transition program for that child. The transition is referred to this project, meaning that you have to look at how you change from one program to another. This the process of changing. That's what transition is. So your role in this assignment is to act as the transitioning planning team. So for that same child that you chose, so say you chose Maria, because I used her in the video I talked about when I sent you that email. You're going to look at Maria and you're going to make a transition plan for her, if that's who you chose last time. So you're going to identify who should be part of the planning team. So you're going to be specific. Don't list someone who was at her old program. And we'll look at Maria's case study in just a second, since we're using her as an example. Instead, I want you to list someone from the old program who should be on the team and what's important information and knowledge that that person would bring to the transition planning process, how they're going to be supportive in this new program. So remember, transition team is not the same as an IEP team, okay? Transition is helping you develop a plan. So the family, the child, sending and receiving programs, we're trying to make sure it's a successful partnership. Okay, we want this to continue to be an ongoing positive experience, so the planning team is really going to help develop the rest of the plan. So here are your goals. You have to set goals and identify challenges for the child. So think about the child's transition team. Think about the kinds of goals that you want to develop. So when you're doing this, ask yourself some of these questions. What are some of the possible challenges that little Maria might face? What kind of problems might arise? What are the different types of demands placed on Maria and staff members? Think about things like transportation, class size, location, how long the child stays there, how long is the hours of the program, those kinds of things. Think about the people going to work directly with the child. And remember, these are not people on the IFSP or IEP team, right? These are people who are trained staff that will work with children. So the team really is going to make the transition period successful one for that child. Now, these transition goals should be achievable, right? So this transition period can be up to 2 months before the change happens, even as little as I would say usually it's about 2 months. It could be a little less than that, and no more than a few weeks after the change. So there could be multiple activities planned to help reach that goal, and that's fine because this is what the transition plan needs maybe for Maria. The next step of the planning is a series of questions, which is number 3, 4, and 5. So you have to make clear the goal for the family and the receiving program. So what role will each person play in the transition? So what role does the family have? What role does the receiving program have? What role does the sending program have? And you should be able to answer these questions. The next part is you're going to develop activities to support the goals that you have. Okay, so first, a set of activities to take place before the child starts the program. So what activities need to happen before they start the program? Secondly, what activities take place after the child starts the new program? And consider what that child needs, what the family needs. Think about the staff. What kind of activities are you actually designing? It needs to include everyone. You need to be thinking of everyone. And then whenever you have a successful plan, you have to evaluate if it's successful. Okay, so more actions might need to be taken. We also have to have what we call a follow-up and evaluation procedure. So that is always important whenever you're doing a transition process or program. You have to follow up with the family, the child, the program, to make sure you're evaluating, did this plan work? Did we meet our goals? How was the process? Did we have to put anything additionally in there in place? Now remember, I want to reiterate, this is not student academic goals like the IFSP or IEP. This is basically to help that child successfully transfer. It's for a small window of time. It's to support the family. It's part of that partnership with the families. And it helps make sure that the child participates and has a good experience. Now, I have included the transition planning form and the transition terms. So let's look at the planning form first. Okay, so this is really what you're going to use to help you. Okay, we're going to walk through this and I'll look at the terms with you. Now remember, this is based on the same child that you did your PowerPoint on. You're going to keep the same child. So we would put Maria, and then this is where we start planning. This is going to help you. You're going to download this and fill this in and answer these questions. So this is your transition plan right here, this document provided. So your first part, which we talked about, is identifying the planning team. So who is going to help be in this team? How are they going to help the transition be successful for little Maria or whoever it is that you have? You're going to decide who can and should provide important information. Okay, so who are the essential members? What role do they play? Second part of the transition plan is going to be those goals. And I want you to talk about these possible challenges and identify those. So what is your goal? What possible challenges might arise for that goal? So use this table. Then you're going to answer 3, 4, and 5. So we're going to write a brief response specific to that case study child and answer these questions. The first question is, what role does the sending program have in this transition? What role do the parents and family have? And what role does the receiving program have? So this is whenever a child is going into a new little preschool or a new classroom, like with a new teacher or a different program. This is what we call the transition plan. The next table is where you're going to actually plan your transition activities. Okay, so what you're going to do is you're going to look at the transaction activities, You're going to prepare for the new setting, the new place where that child's going to be. I want you to have at least 3 activities for that child entering the new classroom or new setting. Now, it doesn't mean they're going to a new school. Sometimes it could be just a different class. But these transitions are so important, this plan, to support that child and the family. So go ahead and you're going to plan 3 activities and number goals it supports. These are your goals. Which goal is it supporting? Okay, so you have to refer back to your goals. And you're going to give it a little short description of an activity. I don't want it to be long. And then who's going to be responsible for that activity? Then the next table is the adjustment piece, right? So you're going to create at least 3 activities that help support the child to be successful. And how are you going to help them adjust? So this section is how you help that child adjust. So you're going to, once again, what is going to help that child adjust to the new setting? What goal over here is it supporting? Give an activity description and who's responsible. The last one is a follow-up. So once that child is in that new classroom or new setting, you're going to follow up to see, number 1, did we meet our goals? Okay? And then how are you going to determine if these goals were met? That's what you have to do. So you will save it and then you will upload it and put it in Dropbox. Okay, so let's go back to the transition terms. Okay, so the terms is really talking and giving you a little bit more information, and this is going to be prevalent to help you in writing your goals into completing this assignment. So what does transition mean? Well, it's passage from one state, one subject, one person, one place to another. So children who have disabilities, their families experience a lot of transitions, right? This isn't normal transitions that you would have with someone who doesn't have special needs. There's a lot more thought that has to go into it. We want to make sure that the child is successful. We want to make sure that we make it as easy as we can when we transition to a new school or a new teacher. This is important in the early childhood years. So a lot of children who have disabilities are usually identified in the early childhood years. So this can be anywhere from birth up to 2 years of life and sometimes a little bit beyond. But they're eligible to receive early intervention under Part C of IDEA. So these services can be home-based, they can be center-based, they could be a combination of both of them. So if they are receiving services, they have what we call a mandated transition at age 3. So this is mandated under IDEA Part C, excuse me. So at that time, the transition really is to help in the preschool service area. So the students are all who are offered these services also are going to be eligible to receive services when they go to a different school or a different classroom. Okay, so the children can receive services under Part B, Section 619. So this can be anywhere from ages 3 to 21. So if we're thinking about that, then we have to put that transition place in there to be part of that mandated practice to support them. So if we're looking at a child, say Maria is disabled, which she is, and she is in a Head Start program or a preschool. At age 5, she may go to the elementary school. Well, if she's going to the elementary school, we need a transition put in place for her, a plan to help her transition to that new setting. So we have to think about how can we develop this plan to make it an appropriate experience. How do we support them under special education services? We think about special education and related services. We don't think of the IEP or IFSP. We really have to concentrate on how do we meet the child's needs when we're relocating them to a new area. So when we're talking specifically about the transition team members, the purpose of this is to put a plan, like a team in place, which is going to involve the following people: the family, the child, the sending party. So where are they at now? Maria's at what school she's at now. And the receiving, which is going to be the new class or the new school she's going to. So we need people involved, all those people involved in it. Normally, the transition team members are going to be someone from the sending team. That's going to be from the old team. That's you guys. You're sending little Maria off, right? So we need to make sure she's successful. But it also needs to include someone from the receiving team as well. So they're aware of what's going on, they're aware of the plan, and they're going to help us go back to that component when we're reflecting to see if our goals were met. So our transition goals are really going to be actions, right? Those are going to be things that we want positive outcomes experienced. These are not going to be the same thing as the IEP goals or IFSP. So these are not related to educational goals. These transition goals are really written so we can support successful new beginnings. So the sending program is where the child's receiving any services through C or B, or any education or care programs, and the receiving team is going to be the program or the new setting where that child will be. So how do we help them prepare? Well, we need to make sure we put activities or practices in place that support the transition. Now, this keyword is important, and I put it in bold. You have to help Maria transition before it actually happens. So there's things happening before she moves into the new school. That's part of the transition piece. So you're going to prepare the family, you're going to prepare little Maria, you're going to prepare the new program, and you're going to have a successful partnership in new beginnings. So what can be done weeks before Maria gets ready to go to the new program? These are going to be the first things that you look at. Then we're going to look at the word after, right? So after the first couple of weeks that child begins the new program, we have to have transitions too. And that's going to really help us see if we met our goals when we're doing that reflection. We want them to have a positive experience. The follow-up and evaluation is important. If you don't follow up and evaluate, how can you make sure you met your goals? And it also lets you adjust things, right? When you're following up in the transition, you may have to make some adjustments to help her adjust better to the new setting. So what will those be? So when you're completing this transition plan, know the case study very carefully. I cannot emphasize this enough. So read the little information. So if you had Maria, read it again. Read it 2 times. Be clear on what her strengths are. And think about what the needs of the family are, because you need to know those to write the transition plan. Know a lot about her disability. And then I want you to really think about yourself and put yourself in a different role, right? So the whole idea behind a transition plan is to make sure we're supporting the parents and the child. But you have to think as a child would. How would you feel for going to a new place? Would you feel safe? Are you going to feel secure? You have to think about, it's unfamiliar to the child. It's scary. There's just new people. I don't know who they are. I've been with these people for 2 years now. And we don't want to set them up in a bad way right out the gate. And think about if you're a parent, right, of little Maria. Think about how worried you are going to be for Maria. Is she going to adjust really well? How can I make it easier for her? How can I make it positive and make her feel more comfortable? And how would it make me feel leaving them in a new setting? I'm not sure if this is what is going to be good for Maria. And then also think about the new program, the new staff that takes in Maria. Okay, how can they make it a positive experience? So if you were at the new program, how would you want the transition plan to go to help you be successful, to help Maria feel comfortable? So those are some guiding questions. This is a really good thing to have open as you're completing your plan. Then, of course, we have the rubric. Now, just like the PowerPoint, this is for 25 points. The things I'm going to really be looking at, the key elements, is I'm going to be, of course, looking at the standards, right, that those are followed. So we're looking at child development and learning context. We're looking at family-teacher partnerships. And then we're looking at developmentally, culturally, linguistically appropriate teacher practices. So the key elements I'm going to be looking for in your plan is, do you understand the child's development at the age that they are, up to age 8? Okay, looking at them physically, socially, emotionally, linguistically, do you understand that case study child? Secondly, I'm going to look at the collaborating component, the partnership with the family at that child's development. Okay, I'm going to be looking at those resources to support the child in our learning environment, and those families understand what's going on, that you're building that positive relationship with the new school, with the parents. And then the last part is really thinking about, if you're caring and understanding, do you show empathy? You have a strong foundations of how you would work with that child and the parents. Okay, so those are things I'm going to be looking at. Also, I'm also going to be looking at if challenges, you're identifying different challenges or problems that could happen and arise. I'm looking at, did you put the different roles that parents are assigned or people in the transition plans, and what their role is in the transition plan. And then I'm going to look at those activities you create, and are they appropriate? Are they establishing those positive relationships? Are they supporting the families? Then we're going to look at the environment and the possibilities and challenges you might have for the environment, identifying the different roles, those sorts of things. So these are the things I want you to be cautious of. I always tell students to look at rubrics twice, once before you start and once after, just to make sure you're meeting those expectations. Okay, so that's the assignment for Module 4. Let's go back and look at some of the lessons. Okay, so the overview, of course, is you're going to have a case study and a discussion. But the whole point of Module 4 is to really look at the role the family plays and you play when we're identifying children for services. So we're going to have to know what the words IFSP means. What does IEP mean? How do they determine child services? Okay. You're going to be watching videos. You're going to do a case study plan and a discussion post. And then, of course, you'll have your module quiz. One thing I want to note, and I'm going to be sending a separate video out this week about it, is I want you to start thinking about your fieldwork assignment. Now, fieldwork usually is some type of place that you would be in a setting where you would complete hours, but we're not doing that. We're doing an alternative fieldwork, which means you're watching videos and doing an assignment instead of going into the actual field. So we need to start being prepared to look at Part A. So this module introduces Part A, but it's not actually due till the next module 5. But this is something I'm going to send a video out on, and I want to talk about it further so there's a good understanding of what I expect. Okay, so I put some learning objectives. The learning objective for this week is really going to be focusing on defining the roles of the families, right, in early childhood. What kind of impact does the disability have on the family, not just the child? You need to know the major requirements of IEPs. Also the referral process and assessments that go along with to see if those children are eligible. One thing too, which is part of our major assignment, is identifying methods of how can we ease the transition plan between different settings and programs. We also need to describe, the environments for these inclusive settings. And we're going to identify those environments and how that can increase the access and participation with children with disabilities. So these kinds of goals or objectives we have focus on our course learning objectives, which are going to be identify recommended practices and elements for inclusive early childhood programs. It also helps us meet our course learning objective, which is demonstrate and interpret the use of screening and diagnostic instruments used with young children with developmental disabilities. And it also helps reach our last CLO, which is know and understand how to work effectively with multidisciplinary team in an effort to coordinate an appropriate education program integrating parents, school, and community resources. So here are your following questions to guide you through each lesson, the 2 lessons. What are the DEC recommended practices for families? What are some of the challenges faced by families who have a child with a disability? What are the steps of the assessment process? What is the role of the early childhood teacher in identifying developmental problems? So in lesson 4.1, I really want those to help guide your thought process as you go through the lesson. Lesson 4.2 is really going to help you complete your transition plan. So it's all about preparing the environment to support inclusion. So this is really where it's going to guide you in completing the case study transition plan. So questions that you need to ask yourself is what program transitions occur in early childhood, and what are the legal requirements mandated by IDEA? We also think about what kind of strategies and can professionals and families use to support the child's transition. What practices are recommended by DC to create supportive environments for young children with disabilities? And then what is it meant by UDL, which stands for Universal Design for Learning? How is this reflected in the recommended practices? Okay, so in our textbook, we are going to read the following chapters, which is really going to help you. I really want to talk to you a little bit about chapter 19. If you look here, it talks about planning transition to support the family. This is going to be very important because it's really going to help you with your transition plan. I also have the module professional partnerships. That's part of the discussion which we talked about. That's there for you. And then those are the DEC, which stands for Division for Early Childhood. Their recommended practices, which is what we were discussing as part of our guiding questions. Okay, here's the vocabulary for Module 4. These terms really contribute to your understanding of content when you're working with children with disabilities. Okay, so here's lesson 4.1. So the first section is talking about development of early childhood, those children, those recommended practices. Then it's talking about the challenges that families face, the steps of the assessment process, and then how they get identified and referred. Okay, so that's the first part. Okay, so I'm not going to go through all this with you. I just wanted to kind of bring it up. This is really going to give you introduction into the division of early childhood and the recommended practices. It's going to really help you understand that a little bit more. Okay, there is a really good resource I put here for you when it talks about the challenges that families face from IRS Center. So if you open it up, there is a module that's really going to help you talk about what the parents go through and how they feel. Okay, the steps of the assessment process. So this is important. This falls under IDEA. Okay, so there's a difference between the different parts. Okay, so for a child under 3, okay, we have early intervention. So this is going to be solely based on Part C of IDEA. A child who's older than 3 is going to focus on Part B of IDEA. Okay, so the early intervention, which is the IFSP process, is going to involve the following. So you have identification and referral. We have intake and family assessment, child evaluation and assessment, the IFSP, which is called the Individualized Family Service Plan, and then we have the service delivery and transition. Okay, so that's why we're completing this transition plan, because this is part of IDEA that's mandated for special ed. So this is why this is put into practice. Okay, there's a chart here that talks about the 5 steps of the early intervention process and how the assessment is involved. So where the assessment component is involved. There's a comparison chart I listed for you, and then I also have a video that talks about the 3 sections. So part 1 is preparing for an IEP meeting and what that would look like. Part 2 is contributing to successful IEP meetings. And part 3 is putting IEPs into action. Okay, so the video is about 46 minutes long. Okay. I hope you view the video, but if you don't, just take note that most important part is part 1, and that is in the first 30 minutes. So if you don't watch all of it, you have to at least watch that first section. Okay, then we talk about identification and referral. So what is the role of the early childhood teacher when you're trying to identify developmental problems? Okay, so here's some tips to keep in mind when you're talking to parents. Be sensitive, always stay positive, be prepared. Caregivers and parents are partners. That goes back to what we talked about. The child's first teacher is the parents. And then document everything and don't sway from the facts, right? So it's even good to have checklists. So I put some short videos in here for you that really can help you strategies of how you approach parents. The next video provides a simulation of the interaction. So a conversation between a parent and a Head Start teacher. So these are really great, and they really help you see what that would actually look like, a conversation happening, if you will. Then we move on to lesson 4.2. So remember, lesson 4.1 and 4.2 is really to help guide you and really engross in the content so you have a better understanding. That way you complete the case study transition plan, that you know how to complete the discussion activity. So the first part is talking about program transitions. So the program transition we talked about is important because it's mandated by the IDEA. It's a legal requirement in early childhood. So we need to understand what the process actually is. So there's a video here talking about families and service providers. They discuss transition a little bit further. So when you're watching the video, think about these two questions. Why is it important for the different programs that serve young children to develop relationships with each other? So we're talking about the receiving program and the sending program. And then also think about how might some of those research-based transition practices be supported by the programs. Then we have a chart here that's going into a little bit about the transition, which the Division of Early Childhood, they identify 2 key practices. This is important to note when you're putting your transition plan together. Okay, so these are practices that are great ideas to help support those young children and families. So, look at that. The next part is talking about the recommended practices by the Division of Early Childhood when we're talking about the environment. Okay, so this is something I told you to consider when you're putting your transition plan together, that was one of those guiding questions, thinking about how the environment really influences the development of the child. So I have some videos here for you. I also have a sheet that helps, or that really discusses further those recommended practices for environments that the Division of Early Childhood recommends. The first video is really talking about how do you gather the information. And the second one is the strategies on how you observe the child's participation and how they adapt to the environment. Remember, these are going to be the new environment they're going into and the environment that they're in now. The last one is, what does universal design for learning look like? What is it meant? What are the recommended practices under DEC and IDEA? So it gives you a little background knowledge into what it is, what the principles are. And then down here at the bottom, you're going to see where it starts talking about fieldwork part A, where you're going to look at the universal design of learning for early childhood. So that is a characteristic. So when we think about universal design for learning, we're thinking about inclusive, accessible, and usable. Okay, so here's some more on what does universal design look like in education. So I really want you to look through this. There's a checklist linked here, which is really good. It gives you guidelines and how you can be supportive. Okay, so that's it, and we already went over the discussion activity and the case study work. If you have any questions about Module 4, please go ahead and contact me. I did want to note real quick before I get off here about the fieldwork assignment. Please go ahead and look at that. There are 2 parts. I'm going to be sending a video out this week discussing it, but it would help if you look at this before I send out the video. So go ahead and look at fieldwork assignment. I specifically want you to pay attention to part A because that's the first part. And then we also have part B. So if you'll note, part A here is due March 23rd. So I want us to start looking in that and working on it now. So I will send a video out probably in the middle of the week, maybe even Tuesday, we'll see. But go ahead and start looking at that now. And then if you have any questions, I'm able to meet with you on Teams. We can have a phone conversation. We can meet in person, just whatever you feel comfortable with. Okay, that's all I have for you. I hope you have a great week. Remember, each module is 2 weeks, so Module 4 will be due March the 5th. All right, guys, take care. I'll see you next time.